Welcome back to the Paddle and Fin Podcast Network. We're brought to you by Pelican, built tough for all situations. Go to pelican.com. Yak Gadget, for all your fine kayak fishing accessory needs. Go to yakgadget.com. Eastport Marina, on the beautiful shores of Dale Hollow Lake. For all your lodging, kayaking, and fishing needs, go to eastport.info. Now let's get this show started.
Welcome back, everyone. Your host, Brad Hurlbus. And on this episode of Feather and Fur, we have Perry Seitzinger in. So we'll bring him in right away. Welcome to the show, Perry.
Hi, Brad. Thanks for having me.
Always love bringing on a fellow grouse hunter. I know my listeners are probably going to be like, really? Another grouse episode? But it's what's most near and dear to my heart. So that comes through quite often. It's real easy to talk about those little timber rockets. So thanks for coming on. I like to start my shows the same way every time and talking about how you got into the outdoors, like how you started hunting. So did you grow up in a hunting family?
Sort of. Dad started hunting when he was about in his mid-30s. And so that was something that was new to him, but immediately appealed to me. I had done quite a bit of fishing prior to that, and but Dad jumped in through a gentleman he met through church. Actually invited him and said, "Hey, I like grouse hunting, and hey, would you come tag along with me?" And it wasn't long before there were shotguns and dogs, and I was tagging along with them. So you know how that goes. So you just start. If I'll put out a caution there. If you're going to get into grouse hunting, be prepared to go down a rabbit hole.
It is a rabbit hole. It's a fun rabbit hole, but you always know when someone gets serious when they get a bird dog. Like, I feel like that's the tipping point. Like, once they get their own bird dog, it's just downhill from there. And it's just at that point, you're hooked for life.
It's absolutely true. I mean, the dog side of it is what really makes it for a lot of us. That's the real connection for us. And Dad wasted no time. I think it was a year after he started hunting that he got our first bird dog, and that would have been about 35 years ago. And brought our first Brittany into the family, and we've had Brittany's ever since. So,
Brittany household, I like it. I actually drove to West Virginia to rescue a Brittany for my oldest nephew. Actually, we drove all the way to West Virginia and picked up a dog. He wound up naming it Oakley.
Nice.
But yeah, that was a fun little dog. I like Brittany's. I've hunted over Brittany's before. They're a great breed. They really are.
And you have a Griff, don't you?
I do.
I've seen Griffs, on hunt tests, but I think that's one of the breeds I haven't gotten the opportunity to hunt over. So.
Mine's a little crazy. Mine's a rescue. I rehomed her at 6, so she hunts well. I see what she could have been had I had her at a puppy.
Yeah,
I would consider getting a puppy, but she doesn't do well around other dogs unless it's in a hunting scenario. And even then, sometimes it doesn't work out real hot. Like, she's just not really good socially. She doesn't have good social skills with other dogs. So she is not what I would recommend as being your first intro to a Griff. I'd say if you wanted to hunt over here, you're always welcome to come out with me, but you're going to want to take her hunting with a grain of salt.
Well, good for you. All that starts early for him, but you got her out there doing what she was meant to do. And that's what's important in the end. So
she loves it. She really does. I mean, now the home she came from, she did start hunting. Like, he was a hunter for the first year of her life, year and a half. His family situation changed. He wound up moving to a different state. He went from New York to somewhere down south, and he just wasn't getting her out. And he realized with his work hours, he just she just wasn't happy. So I commend him for recognizing that he wasn't giving what the dog needed also.
Yeah, absolutely. It goes both ways, doesn't it?
It does. So she's a great little dog. I love her. That's crazy. I mean, it's just crazy how much a dog just embeds themselves into your life.
Yeah, they're a key role of our families. I know they always have been here. I mean, they get everything they need and then some. And sometimes I'm told I'll give them more attention than I do my family. So I think if you've had dogs, you may have also been there too. So.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like, I've seen some Instagram reels or TikToks go around to how I talk to my dog versus how I talk to like my significant other.
Yeah.
It's quite funny. It is definitely quite funny because it's so true. Like it hits so close to home. Like I'm never cranky with my dog like I can be with my wife or vice versa. It's just always like, oh, who's a good girl? And it's just like, I don't ever talk that nicely to anybody else in my life.
Well, and the key thing is the dogs never talk back. So, they they don't ever talk back. So
That is true. So how many Britneys do you have right now then?
right now I have two. I have she's going to be April 4th. She'll be 6 years old, female.
Right.
And then I have her son, who is a year and a half old. So the female her name is Sawyer, and the younger male, his name is Tank. And funny story about his name. We were talking about naming them, and this is a litter we had, obviously, but we were talking about naming them as a family. And I asked my son what he wanted to name them, and he said Tank Meatball Destroyer. So that is his registered name, believe it or not. It was too good not to put on paper. So and it fits him perfectly too. So
that's awesome. Tank Meatball Destroyer.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Just a big meatball of a dog. Love it.
And he is for a Brittany. He's on the big side. He's big bone, muscular, just a stout dog. He runs hard and big, and just a knucklehead type of personality. Just always happy and loves other dogs, and just it just fits him perfectly. So I'm glad we made that choice.
That's awesome. That and it just brings the family more into it, right? Because now your son has a little more reason to feed the dog, right? When he named the dog.
Yeah, absolutely. He's just getting into 4-H obedience and showmanship with them. That litter, I can't tell you that litter of pups came during COVID stuff, and timing wise, it couldn't have been more perfect for a family activity. It gave us something to bond around every day. We have all those chores that come along with having a litter of pups, and the routines and the feeding and the weighing them, and getting them out to potty and the whole 9 yards. It just was great for family bonding.
That's awesome. And what a way to break up the whole don't go anywhere, stay at home, this, that, and other thing when COVID first came out, because no one knew it. At that point, everything was so confusing because nobody really knew. And it was these just utmost like, well, let's make it the tightest regulations possible. So to actually have a good reason to stay home, even because of all these pups and the care they need and everything else. I mean, that's just great timing.
Yeah, it just brought us a tremendous amount of joy. It really, really did. So it was a good decision looking back. We were nervous about it. That's only the second litter of Brittany's we've ever bred. Otherwise, we've always bought from a breeder. And I remember Dad having a litter of Brits when I was young, and we had that litter was actually 12. And so we had to rotate pups in and out and hand feed them and stuff. And that, I was probably, I don't know, 9-10 years old, maybe a little bit older than that when that happened. And that just made a huge, huge impression on me, seeing the whole birthing process and how to take care of those pups. And I mean, it's just, it really molded me as a bird dog guy, and always wanting to have a Brit in the house. So
that's awesome. It's also kind of, I mean, it's cool that you're carrying on those traditions of being a Brit fan, growing up with the Brits, your dad doing Brits, and you're staying with Brits. And I'm willing to bet there's probably a good chance if your son continues on to hunting, he'll stay a Brittany guy. It's just kind of one of those cool traditions that you're continuing to pass along.
Yeah, he can choose to do what he wants to do, but that would be my hope. I'm big on legacy stuff. I try to think about that stuff, and try to leave similar legacies that I've been given, and as well as opportunities. So I think that's really important to share the history in the past and where things came from, and how you got where you are. So
I agree 100%. I didn't grow up in a hunting home. I took it on myself in my early 20s. I wound up meeting a really good friend I've done grouse camp with. I think this is the 13th year coming up this fall. So, I mean, we've got some years in now. But his father was a big grouse hunter, and he grew up deer hunting and then walk in the woods during archery season with his dad, then also grouse hunting. So his dad kind of took me under his wing as well. And I learned a lot from him. And we kind of try to carry on those traditions that his dad had. And while my dad had passed already at that point, it was cool to be like, he's kind of like another father figure in that way, and to learn from him and everything else. It was cool. I mean, it just really was. And now we try to like respect that and carry on those traditions as well.
It's so important to do. That's awesome that you've had that opportunity, even though you didn't start hunting until later in life, to have that impression, because that historical perspective of, where things came from, how they used to be, and where things are at now are really important, especially when it comes to, public policy stuff that surrounds natural resources, hunting, fishing, forest management. You name it, to have that historical perspective is so critical in making really good decisions for the future.
And I mean, that's a huge thing of what you do as well, which there's no introduction there. I guess we'll just roll into it. You're a forester. I mean, you do a lot with forestry programs, and habitat and planning for the future of habitat is crucial for grouse, and crucial for all species really, but grouse as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a consulting forester. I have a degree in forestry from Purdue University. Unfortunately, they had lost the other night. I was actually sitting in Wisconsin watching the game. But anyhow, I help private landowners and assist private landowners primarily with a whole host of forest management practices. In the end, I'm a field forester. I'm out there, painting trees and planting trees and spraying invasive plants and species and doing chainsaw work. That's my love. I'm really connected to the land, and but I do a great deal in advocating for forest management and healthy forest in Indiana, and helping out with public policy decisions and guiding public policy decisions here as well. So it's a true passion to me. The forestry is. I'm just as passionate about it, if not more, than upland bird hunting. So.
And I mean, that can tell. I mean, I've followed you on Instagram for a while now, a couple of years at least, and you've got some excellent posts out there on different habitat stuff and things along those lines. And it seems like you just have a big wealth of knowledge when it comes to those practices. And you're very vocal in a good way of making sure that the habitat is addressed now, as with grouse and other things. I mean, you have to be cutting in order to improve habitat, because it's got old forest isn't for birds, right?
Well, there's birds that depend on old forest, and there's birds that depend on young forest, and then there's generalists that depend on diverse forest. And so
Sure.
It's all about balance in the end. We need a little bit of all of it. I mean, I can think of, a specific spot, one of my favorite spots, that I grouse hunt and woodcock hunt in Michigan. And we purposefully hunt it in the evening and get back to the truck as the sun's going down. And the reason for it is the grouse are hanging out in a mature red oak stand. And if the acorns are coming down, then you're catching them out there in the wide open in a red oak stand in the evening while they're feeding. And so it's important. But what's neat about that is that mature red oak stand adjoins a young mixed aspen stand, and then also a creek bottom. And so, you'll have all different types of habitat coming together, and that's critical.
Sure. They have the breed. They have the nest, not nesting. They have the roost area, the cover. They've got the wetland area for temperatures and stuff like. I mean, because that's one thing I always think about as I've learned more, is how important wetlands really can be to grouse hunting as well. Like a lot of people, when I first started, like wetlands, I'm a big woodcock hunter. I'm like, oh, wetlands, but I never really put that piece together until much later, that like the lowlands and the wetlands and the swamps can play huge roles for grouse habitat.
Yeah, those, when it comes to those areas, whether it's a tag alder swamp or a creek bottom, what's neat about that, a lot of that's dictated by beaver activity. And so those beavers aren't always going to stay there. So there'll be times that stuff floods and dies off. And then the beavers leave, and the waterway opens up and it drains back out. And guess what happens? It turns back into young successional forest again eventually, but then it'll flood again. And so it's kind of in that perpetual state of young forest habitat. And that's what's important.
This just seems, I mean, the picture there just seems like hard, like for me to grasp. I mean, I understand like the diverse habitats, I understand have different age cuts and things like that. But when it comes to trying to manage that, like, or even like just look at it from a bigger picture, it's like, wow, I have no idea what's going on. I'll admit it.
Well, you're not the only one when it comes to the forestry stuff. A lot, well, I was about to say most, but a lot of hunters understand the importance of forest management, understand that it is needed to create habitat for these birds or other game species. But they don't understand all the planning that goes into it and execution and what all's involved with it. And so, it can be, especially on public lands, that can be a very, very long process. It starts with, tons and tons of inventory data. So we know exactly, what we have out there on the landscape in regards to forest. And then you're looking at that inventories and you're analyzing that data. And from that, you're developing management plans. And often these management plans, it's not like row crops where we're looking at this for 1 year. We're looking at this for decades. And
Sure.
and so it's a very involved process with a lot of thought. And then to execute it on public lands is even more difficult. You have public review processes, environmental review processes. There's all these hoops to jump through before you can finally actually get some habitat on the ground and manage it. And so I think that most people don't know what all it takes behind the scenes to actually get this stuff done. And that's why it's so important to advocate for it and get your voice heard when there's opportunities to dictate public policy. That is what is so important about forest management. Is a long-term thing. There's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of planning, and it takes a lot to actually execute it. And that's because all the scrutiny from people that don't necessarily agree with forest management or understand it or want to understand it. And so because of that, we have to go through all those processes.
I'm trying to remember where it was, if it was northern Wisconsin or northern Michigan. I think it might have been the UP. They had a lot of signs out on the public land in the national forest and other things that said this healthy forest is done by forestry, is created by cutting and forestry practices. And it seemed like they had a really big campaign. I think it was UP. I'm trying to remember. But it seemed like they had a really big campaign going on up there saying, this is why we cut trees. This is why we manage our forests. And it's to create healthier forests.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a unique way to do it because I don't remember seeing that in the past. I mean, you hear people, I've heard people before, oh, I can't believe they cut this. I can't believe they did that. But it's like, we always talk about habitat, and habitat takes maintenance, and maintenance is going to be cutting areas at certain times. Why they cut that area, I don't know. You would know. You'd probably be like, oh, they cut that for this type of planning, Bob. But for me, I just know, and I hope that there's people in our state and the states that I hunt that have the knowledge that you do. And hearing about the review process, it gives me a little bit of faith that they are looking at a long-term picture.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the folks that are especially managing, public lands that most of grouse and woodcock hunting takes place on, they're very connected to that resource, and they have all the training in the world to take care of it. And they take it on as if it's their own, and they treat it as if it's their own. And so the best thing is to leave those management decisions in the hands of those boots on the ground natural resource managers. They know that resource better than anybody else. They have all the data. They've reviewed all the data. They've been out on the ground, and they have a plan in place. And that plan is certainly going to be sustainable. They want to continue to have their jobs in the future, and it's just like loggers or the timber industry. They want this to be sustainable because they want the industry to thrive for forever. So,
right. I mean, they can't. I mean, if they're not careful, like logging, if you're not careful in your practices there, I mean, you could cut yourself literally right out of a job. I mean, you could just decimate your entire career path.
That's right. So my point is that there's no incentive to do this in a way that is, damaging an ecosystem, or in a way that it isn't sustainable. That there's just no incentive for that.
And that makes sense. I mean, that makes sense a lot. And you're right, there are the people on the ground that do have the knowledge, and there's the ones that I'm going to trust in, people like you, but people for like the state and different. I'm sure there's different. I'm sure Rough Grouse Society actually has people on the ground as well, and different nonprofits. I mean, because they're always talking about habitat and everything else, so it makes sense that they would provide input when possible.
Yeah, that brings up a good point about input. Most of these forest restoration or timber harvest on public land require public input. And so there's commenting periods. And so it's very important that if you want to continue to see quality habitat on the ground in your state, that you get involved and make sure you drop your comments in when appropriate. There should be organizations like Rough Grouse Society or other forestry organizations within the state that you can get that information from. If you don't go to the Department of Forestry, directly and say, hey, I would like to know about commenting periods, and can you make me aware of those so that I can comment on them. The reason I have dug so deep on all of this is I grew up grouse hunting here in southern Indiana, and that was in the 90s. And a good day of grouse hunting, you can move 12 to 15 birds in a day here. Now that's a bad day in some states,
Right.
but that was pretty good grouse hunting for Indiana. And like I said, that was in the 90s that we could do that. And in 2020, the bird was listed as state endangered. I had a big role in that. I pushed the Natural Resource Commission to make that rule change and make the rough grouse state endangered, to bring some attention to it. And that's a very short time period to go from having a healthy, sustainable, huntable population of grouse to none. And it is primarily due to pressure from those opposed to forest management and a shift in policy in managing our public lands here in Indiana. And so I say this as a warning to other states that continue to have good hunting. You get on the ball now, because in Indiana, what happened is we waited too long, and now we're to the point where there may be no return.
So for someone like me that doesn't know what he's looking at, he doesn't understand forestry management planning, things like that, how would you suggest we go about in the commenting period to like be effective and be an advocate for the grouse, for the woodcock, and for deer, for like, how would you suggest, like someone like me, like what do I need to have as a basic understanding so I can have beneficial input, or what part of like my state forestry people like should I look at to know what they're doing to say, yes, we're moving forward and not backwards?
Well, typically they'll share that management plan and what they're going to do, and review it. A lot of it you're not going to understand, but there's going to be things as a grouse hunter you're going to understand out of it. And advocate for what you want. Say I encourage timber harvesting, support timber harvesting, period, and then go into specific about supporting the creation of young forest habitat, and support having diverse forests. I always use the term, we want to have a diversity of age classes. Okay, so we want to have young forest, we want to have old forest, and we want to have everything in between. And due to the lack of natural disturbances on the landscape anymore, the only way to accomplish that is through managing the forest. In the past we had, tornadoes, fires, wildfires, beaver activity. I mean, there was even, buffaloes and passenger pigeons had a role in disturbing the forest, and we've moved away. The disturbance is less prevalent. We've suppressed wildfire. And so a lot of those things are gone now, and it's our responsibility to step forward and do that. But back to to commenting, and to give you a more direct answer, I think one of the best ways to do that is to get involved with an organization that is in the know. Lots of times they will help you guide your comments on specific topics, specific projects, and specific harvests. Because like you said, you don't have a background in it, you don't know the specifics, so it can be intimidating to even try to prepare a comment, and whether you know or not, it makes a difference. So join a forestry organization, or a wildlife organization, or a organization like the Rough Grouse Society that is in the know and has experts that can kind of break it down for you. We're all, a lot of the NGOs and conservation organizations are all working together on issues like that. I know we do here in Indiana. We even I formed a coalition of forestry and conservation organizations just for that purpose of networking, sharing ideas, keeping people each other abreast of what's going on at the State House and within the Natural Resource Commission. And now we don't let much slip by us, and we come together. Sometimes we have sign-on letters where multiple organizations will sign on to a letter and submit comments. Sometimes we ask people to do it individually. It all depends on the situation. And so being engaged and involved with those types of organization is going to keep you in the know and give you the knowledge that you need to make these comments.
And that's good. I mean, that makes sense, because it's not my day job. I don't know what I'm doing. The last thing I want to do is make a comment that actually isn't what I want, right? Because I want the forest to be healthy. Diverse age classes, like you said, makes perfect sense. I mean, but I don't want to make a comment that is completely against because I think I'm working out the right direction. I think, we want to do it. Like, that makes sense. I support this plan, when in really, because I don't understand the plan, I'm actually commenting against everything I believe in, because I don't understand what I'm looking at.
Yeah, you can actually, that's exactly right. It can get twisted, and without knowing the background, many a times, just the background and the politics behind something, could be to your detriment when you're making a comment like that, if you're not in the know. Another thing I would suggest is, get involved with your Department of Natural Resource leaders and administrators, and don't just talk at them. Like, see what you can do to help them. Sometimes they need help on policy issues in the State House that they are supporting or have developed, and there's opportunities to go testify at the State House. All of a sudden they see you as a partner. I realized when I started doing that, testifying on behalf of them and supporting them on certain issues. I don't have to support them on everything. That's not what I'm saying, but showing that support on individual issues with them and having their backs, all of a sudden they're calling me and asking me my opinion on items before they even jump into them. And so getting involved with your natural resource staff is really important too.
And that makes sense. I mean, their job, like you said, for the forestry division and that, I mean, their job is to look out for the habitat, look out for the forest, create healthy forests. It's actually kind of like wildfire is a huge thing. I mean, I didn't know this. I didn't realize this until I actually moved out to California, and we were at one of the national parks, and they were talking about how big of a role forest fire actually plays there. On I think it's the sequoia trees. Like, the sequoia trees only drop seeds during a fire. Like, it takes the heat for the seed pods to open.
Yeah, there's a lot of fire dependent species out there, but both wildlife and vegetation. And so, it's critical. Smokey the Bear campaign has been one of the most successful advertising campaigns in the history of man. And now we're finding out a lot of it has been to our detriment. Of course, we don't want raging wildfires, right? But prescribed fire is an excellent tool for managing habitat. Something that happens to benefit, rough grouse and American woodcock, as well as a whole host of other game bird species and songbird species. So, it's taken that long to teach people that fire is a bad thing, it's going to take a while to get people used to the idea that, hey, we need fire. But I think we're getting there. You're seeing more and more in the media about it, and I think people are beginning to have their eyes open. So.
And I even locally here, there's plenty of natural areas. I've got state land even just outside of where I'm at, which is a major city in Wisconsin. I see quite a few more prescribed burns. I saw quite a few on some bigger areas last year, which actually shocked me that they were starting to manage that way, which is good. I'm 100% for it because I'm for quality habitat. So to see them come out on these lands and in an area which I wouldn't say normally politically would be in agreement with that type of management practice, I'm actually excited to see it. It shows that there is more knowledge. The knowledge is getting passed to the people that it needs to be, and that they're starting to take these habitat, even in this more city area, a little more seriously.
Yeah, you mentioned something really important. That's that educational piece to that. That is critical. We have to have that education and outreach from folks like myself and other natural resource professionals to go along with this, so that the public knows what's going on. One of the greatest examples of what fire can do is there in northwestern Wisconsin, where you guys still have some wild sharptails left. Those landscapes up there are completely fire dependent, and that bird, that sharp-tailed grouse, is completely dependent on that fire adapted landscape. And so that's a perfect example. There's a couple organizations that are doing some great work up there, trying to make sure that they can expand the sharp-tailed grouse range and connect isolated pieces of habitat. And so I applaud what's going on up there in northwest Wisconsin for sure.
Seems like there's a big push in the past year that I've noticed for that area, because I've learned a lot. I know there's now a Wisconsin Sharp-tailed Grouse Society. I think that if that isn't relatively new, it started to get a lot more traction and a lot more publicity in the past year. So it's either new or now they're really focused on trying to get the word out. I've never been up in that area. I had no idea what that barren landscape was like until I started to follow that page and saw the difference in the habitat. And it blew my mind. Like, it's so different.
Yeah, it's like you're in a different world. It's like you're not even in Wisconsin, right? Especially being that far north.
Right.
And I know a couple guys that have done some great work with that organization, and they deserve a lot of credit because they have made a big push. They've been around for a while, but in the last 2 years, they've really made a big push, and I really applaud that. That is awesome conservation effort.
And it's great because I've always known that bird was on the decline in Wisconsin. I really didn't know how to help it necessarily. And now that there are these organizations, that being one of them, and I'm a supporter of it now. And it's just amazing. It's something I don't want to see, like what you said in Indiana. Like, I don't want that to happen here in Wisconsin. And I believe Minnesota still has a good population of sharptails, but I don't want Wisconsin to lose theirs. I don't want to lose what's a native species to Wisconsin.
Yeah, I mean, it had gotten to the point where they were wondering if there was enough genetic variability for the population to continue to survive. So, but that's a great example of hunters and conservationists just wrapping their minds around something, putting their hearts into something, and going after it and making sure it happens. That is the level of conservation effort that it takes from us as hunters to actually make a difference. And so I say this lots of times, and it may not be popular, but it is not enough just to buy a hunting license. It is not enough to just go attend a banquet for a conservation organization. Get out there and get your hands dirty. I mean, the wildlife that we pursue really deserves that at the very, very least.
I agree. I mean, that's very well said. I don't even know how to add anything to that, because it's our job as hunters to be good stewards, right? I mean, we don't want at least all the hunters I know, and yeah, a lot of hunters go through that phase where limits are the main thing. I went through it with duck when I was a duck hunter, man. The only thing I cared about was getting a limit, right? And now that's completely changed because now I'm like habitat. I want to make sure there's ducks for the future. Same for grouse. I want to make sure we have good forestry practice, even though I don't know what that practice is. I want to make sure we have good forestry practice to make sure there are grouse in the future. I want to make sure now that I've seen so much more about this sharptail, I want to make sure that they get the focus and the support they need so they can continue to move these practices so we don't lose that bird from the state. I mean, there's more to it than just, you're right, going to a banquet or throwing a little bit or buying your hunting licenses. There's ways to be vocal or support organizations that have the ability to be vocal.
Absolutely. It's absolutely imperative to do that. And I once had that bloodlust too, that you're talking about chasing limits and that kind of thing. But now for me, it's more about, being with friends, being out in nature, and more importantly, enjoying the dog work. It's just that's my release from my regular work and the regular world. So that's where I find peace.
And I sign off on all my episodes now. It took me a while to figure out how to sign off, but it finally came to me, and it's keep chasing that experience.
Yeah.
And really that's really what it is to me, is it's the experience. It's not just harvesting an animal. Like, that's just a small piece of the experience. And I don't need that piece to have an amazing experience anymore. Because to me, it's everything. It's the dog work. It's the beauty in nature. It's the companionship with friends. It's the traditions you carry on. It's those experiences that you would never have unless if you were out in the outdoors doing something. It's not just sitting in front of a computer. It's not sitting in front of your TV. It's even waking up in the morning and going for a hike, a sunrise hike on some state land locally with my camera and just watching the world wake up. I mean, all of that can easily be shown like through like hunting. I mean, hunting is far more than like the shooting of a bird or an animal to me. It's that whole entire experience.
You couldn't be more spot on. I mean, those are my thoughts exactly on it. And in fact, I'll share this with you. I watched my dad work real hard his whole life. He did his best to get me out hunting as much as possible, which he did a great job of it. But he had this idea that, when he retired, then he was going to get to go out and chase those experiences that he wanted to. Well, because of his health and some injuries he had in his life, he doesn't get around very good. And in retirement, he's been barely able to get out and bird hunt with me. And so I kind of realized that. I sat down with my hunting buddies about 3 years ago, and I said, okay, here's the deal. We used to have grouse camp in Michigan every single year. And that was just our thing. That's what was going to happen. That's how we were going to get together and spend our time. And we still get up to Michigan. But what we decided 3 years ago is we're gonna pick a new state, a new species, and we're just gonna go do it. And we're gonna go do it on public land. We're not gonna be guided. We're just gonna go into the unknown. We're gonna experience the local culture. We're gonna experience the different habitat. We're gonna try to figure out how to find these birds. And man, it's been the best decision we could have made as a group. It's taken a little bit more coordination and stuff to get it done and work to get it done, but the reward is so wonderful. So we started a couple years back with North Dakota, which was an awesome experience, hunting the prairie birds. And then last year we spent a couple weeks down in Arizona, chasing 3 different species of quail. And this coming year, we're going to try to get after some sage grouse, possibly in Wyoming or Montana. And so the anticipation of those hunts and the planning that goes into them, it's wonderful. And I know that I'm going to get to experience it while I'm still healthy and able and financially capable of supporting my habit, my addiction. So.
It's funny you say that you've kind of changed it up and started doing things like that, because it's actually a perspective I've been looking at more, especially after starting this podcast, because this podcast has introduced me to whole different areas of hunting, from guys that are in like Montana, Arizona, California, Utah, Washington. Like all these people are like, if you ever make it out here, look me up. We'll get out. We'll get out with our dogs. And it's like, and it's really got me to the point now where it's like when I get a new dog, because Pippa being 10, it's really not fair. She deserves an easy life of retirement now, right? Like I'm not going to take her to Arizona and run her in terrain like that anymore. Things along those lines. But when I am able to change my stable up, when she unfortunately passes, which is a thing all dog owners have to go through, which I don't wish upon even my worst enemy, because it's just a terrible experience, because they're such a pivotal part of your life and so many experiences and memories. But when that day does come and I've got a new dog, and that's actually something I'm looking to make the change to, of making sure I do get one trip a year to a different area for even a different species. And then once I'm out of species, hunting a same species in a completely different state or area even.
Yeah, it's just I highly recommend it. It is so rewarding, and you learn things. You get to see pieces of the country because of our dogs and these birds. You get to see places you would never ever think of going to or have the opportunity to go and see. And so that is man, that's a true blessing to be able to do that. And I highly encourage it for everyone. I mean, it can even involve discipline and changes in your life, like health changes. I mean, some of those hunts are really challenging physically, may require you to lose a few pounds and put in some exercise and prepare in ways that you wouldn't otherwise challenge yourself. So I think it's an awesome thing.
Absolutely. I mean, talking to some of the guys out west, the miles they cover and the terrain they're in, I'm like, oh man, that's nothing like what I'm used to. I try to stay semi-healthy. I take my dogs out I take my dog out quite a bit and walk. I do that, but I am not in the physical shape I would want to be in before a trip like that. And could I do it? Sure. Would I probably be miserable at the end of the day? Yep. I don't want to be miserable. I want to put the time in before I go out there to make sure I am physically capable to actually enjoy it rather than just push through it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's awesome. So where are you going this year then?
Either Wyoming or Montana. We have not decided it yet. It takes a lot of research and dialing things in, and I'm not one that wants to ask somebody for a starting point. Even I want to do the research and figure it out on my own. And the reason for that is it makes things so much more rewarding when you are successful. And
Sure.
I can't emphasize that enough to people. Take the time to do all the research on your own, figure it out. The information's out there. It just takes time. And so we're trying to decide whether to pin it down to Montana or Wyoming. The goal will be to try to get everybody a sage grouse, and then from there chase some of the other birds that are available, primarily huns and sharptails. And in Wyoming, the sage grouse season's the last 2 weeks of September, and then Montana, it's the entire month of September. So there's things to consider weather-wise there too, and a lot of other factors. So we haven't quite honed it in yet, but it won't be too long, because you're going to have to start booking places and that sort of thing. Make sure you have places to stay and all those sorts of things. So,
right. Have you hunted huns before?
I have in North Dakota. Yeah, they're crazy. I love covey.
I've heard.
Yeah, I love covey birds. I grew up quail hunting here in Indiana, and I still do. Lots of people will tell you there aren't birds here in Indiana. There's still birds here in Indiana. Access isn't great to them, but where there's habitat, there are birds. I can get somebody out on a quail hunt here in Indiana, and we'll find 5 to 7 coveys of quail in a day. Those huns are a lot like Bob White's, except the huns run considerably more. Man, just to see those type of covey birds like that on the prairie it's a neat experience. So.
Huns are on my list. Huns and quail. I've never got to experience actually hunting wild coveys of anything like that. I've planted quail, which those don't count. I mean, that's not even a covey, right? I mean, that's for dog training. There's nothing against people that like preserve hunts. That's fine. That's your thing. But I prefer chasing birds in the wild. And if I want to go hunt quail, I want to bust a covey. I don't want to kick up a single bird. That's not now, unless if you busted a covey and then you go back for smaller groups, then that's different. I get that. But huns and quail are definitely high on my list. I mean, those are the things I look forward to when it gets to that point in time. I look forward to all those new experiences.
There's nothing like a covey rise, and people describe it as covey panic. You'd think it'd be easy, but most people, it takes them a while to figure out how to shoot covey birds, because you see a covey of birds get up, you pull up your shotgun and shoot, and forget that you have to pick out a single bird. But you got wings in your face and dogs going everywhere, birds going everywhere, and it can be difficult to figure out how to shoot covey birds. So it's tough. So
I can believe that completely, because I see that in new duck hunters where they just pull up and they start flock shooting. I'm like, you got to pick a bird. I know it's hard. Slow down. I know you don't think you can. There's more time than what you think. And I know I'll make all these mistakes when I first start hunting these birds. I know it. And I'll have to go back and be like, you tell new hunters this all the time. You got to listen to your own advice. Slow down, pick a bird, make a good shot.
Yeah, but that the good thing about that is that failure again makes success in the end all that more enjoyable. Today, especially with the mapping apps and stuff like that and social media, it's kind of that everybody kind of wants that instant success. When I first started grouse hunting, almost 35 years ago, I had a compass, a topo map, and a dog with a bell on its collar. I mean, that is it, and some walking boots, And there was you were going into the complete unknown, and it took a long time to figure out how to be successful at it. But once I was successful at it, then all those troubles, all those failures, all that hard work, man, that made it so sweet and so enjoyable and so impressionable. I encourage everybody to kind of get back to those roots.
I agree. I mean, technology is great. I still try to keep things as simple as possible, especially grouse hunting. I always have a compass on me. I trust all my electronics. I still use electronics. I'm not saying I don't, but I always have a compass on me. I pay attention which way the road was heading when I walked in so I can get back to the road, things like that. Cause I'm always not paranoid, but I want to make sure I make it out of the woods. And even in the north woods of Wisconsin, as long as you can walk in a single direction and you have general idea of the area you're in by looking at a map, eventually you're going to hit a body of water or another logging road, as long as you can keep walking straight. If you start walking in circles is when you're really going to get yourself in trouble.
Yeah. You better take note and know which way that stream was flowing when you were walking in. Make sure you're going the opposite way. And I'm not knocking the technology. I utilize all of it myself. My dogs have electronics on them. I have the mapping apps and all that, and I use them in my forestry business all the time. And
sure.
So it's a great tool. Just be willing to put in that time, and you'll find that the reward is all that much greater.
And I know where you're going with that. It wasn't a knock against technology, but there are hunts I go on where in areas where I'm very comfortable that I will leave some of that at home. I mean, I'll make sure my dogs are safe always. I always make sure I'm running some sort of collars, as I run GPS collars now, because in case she would ever bolt for some reason, who knows what happened. I want to make sure she comes home at the end of the day. I don't want to be sitting there leaving a kennel and my jacket out where my truck was parked, hoping she makes it back to it. Like, that's not a feeling. I don't think I can emotionally go through that well.
I've been there. I've had to leave a hunting vest at the parking spot, and luckily the next morning, that was our very first Brittany. He liked to chase deer, and we didn't have e-collars, or at least reliable e-collars, in that day. And so luckily he was laying on that vest when we got back the next morning to pick him up. So, and you're right. That's man, what a better insurance policy than a tracking collar.
We ran into that up north this past year. We were walking into a grouse cover, and we started to hear a beeper collar off in the distance. I'm like, let's go somewhere else. And the beeper kept getting closer and closer. I'm like, this is weird. Like this dog is coming straight at us, and you can hear someone way in the distance with an occasional whistle. I'm like, all right, let's get back to the car because I already know my dog doesn't like other random new dogs. So we got our dogs kenneled up, and all of a sudden here comes this English pointer bolting out of the woods, looking at us like, hey, where am I?
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not just leaving this dog. So this dog basically ran, like we just like, well, let's just start walking down the road and figure out where this guy was. And we actually ran into him. He was heading back to his truck. And from the way he told us he went in, this dog was a solid mile away from him.
Yeah.
Which in the grouse woods, in the north woods, it was, I know a mile out for those guys out west mean nothing. Like their dog's range, a mile in the woods up north, that's a long ways away.
Yeah, through that cover, it's incredible. I think of an example. A friend of mine just got into bird hunting a few years ago through me introducing it to him. Come to think of it, all the guys I regularly bird hunt with, I introduced them to bird hunting, which is pretty rewarding in of itself. But and I got a pretty unique clan of guys that I hunt with, core group of guys that I hunt with. But he just loved grouse hunting from the get-go, and he decided he was going to get a dog. But he's an executive. He doesn't, and has 3 children, didn't necessarily have the time for his first dog to do a bunch of training. So he decided he was going to buy it was like a 9 or 10-year-old Nastra dog. It run the Nastra circuit for years and years and been really successful as a pointer. And I'm going to tell a couple stories about this dog just because he's so entertaining. But the first run we had him out on, my buddy Joe had only had him for 2 weeks, and so they really had no connection. Like,
sure.
And here he is setting them loose in the North Woods, and that dog wasn't going to listen to Joe for nothing. Well, we're watching the screen of the tracking collar of the handheld, and he's at 200 yards, and he's at 400 yards, and before we know it, this dog's out 1,400 yards. And in the North Woods, going through tag alder swamps and beaver ponds and aspen thickets, and you name it. He said, I'm just going to have to go get him because he wasn't stopping. We kind of saw he'd gotten into a creek bottom. We were assuming he was bouncing around on birds and found birds and that type of thing. But Joe came out of the woods, and he was bleeding. His shirt was ripped. I mean, he was sweating. He had taken his vest off, and it was a mess. I mean, it looked like he had literally gotten in a fight. And that dog looked happy as heck on the lead. He healed really well. He's like, "What I do wrong? You set me loose to hunt. I'm out here hunting." But I'll tell another quick story about that dog. It's something that's enjoyable. So that dog had run Nastra, and for years and years and years, he'd become really conditioned. So we set him out the first time, and like within 30 minutes, he just went back to the truck and sat at the truck. And we're like, this is really strange, He had hunted some quail and grouse as a real young pup, but we started paying attention, and I finally figured it out because I belong to a club that's primarily Nastra guys. And that's National Shoot to Retrieve for anybody that doesn't know. But that dog, we'd set him loose, and you'd watch the GPS, and he'd make like 4 clover loop, like four leaves of a clover, big loops out there, and maybe make a few more casts after that. And at 30 minutes on the dot, that dog would be back at the truck sitting, looking at you like, I did a good job, didn't I, boss? Well, what it was is that's how they encouraged them to run the trial fields, and so and their braces are 30 minutes, and so he was so proud of himself, thought he was just doing great work. It took quite a while to get him, used to operating in a different way, and he turned out to be a really great dog. We lost him last year, but just had some awesome, memorable hunts with him.
That's awesome, and I know there's a lot of people that don't agree with buying started dogs or finished dogs or anything like that, but I'm 100% for it. I really am. I've had conversations on this show before because if you don't have the time to train it, there's there's nothing wrong with buying a dog that someone else trained or taking a dog to training as long as you get to continue to enjoy the outdoors. Like there's people that love dog training that are super passionate about it. I love dog training, but if I don't have the time to do it, I'm not too proud to take my dog somewhere for help to make sure the dog is safe and is trained and is a good experience for everyone.
Yeah, I tell you, watching my buddy and how the loss of that dog affected him, it made no difference to him whether it was a dog that he had started with or somebody else had started. In the end, it was a dog that was loved and got to do what he wanted to do, and my buddy supported that. And so they all need homes, and they all need to be chasing their passions, just like we like to chase our passion. So.
And there's a show that touched base quite a bit on this, and I'm going to say it again because I don't want people to get the wrong idea. Just because a dog's a washout for field trials or something like that doesn't mean that it's a bad dog. It's probably more dog than a weekend hunter would ever need. Actually, it's just because they can't take the pressure of what those different circuits need.
Yeah, it could be something as minor as tail set, how they set their tail, or don't quite run quite big enough. I mean, there's all kinds of little things. The field trialers are trying to develop the best of the best,
Right.
And so just because a dog has a tail that's a little low doesn't make him a bad hunting dog. And so you're spot on with that. And you should want to have a dog that was bred to meet high standards, which those dogs are. I mean, these guys aren't going to breed dogs. I don't field trial, but these guys aren't going to breed dogs that aren't bred to a very, very high standard. That's the name of the game.
Right. I mean, they're looking for perfection for the trial that they're doing. And you're right. There's so many different things that can go into what can or can't make that dog, but those dogs are incredible. They really are.
They are. They really, really are.
It's been great talking to you. I mean, we're right at that hour mark. So this conversation actually worked out perfect time in there. I think ending on a dog note, it's always a high note in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Leave the next couple minutes so people can get in touch with you. Let them know your Instagram. You can let them know if they're in Indiana and they have forestry questions or maybe want to hire you as a consultant. Let them know your business name. Just put it all out there.
Yeah, the best way to reach me is through my email. If you're interested in hiring me for any of my forestry services, it's psforestry@yahoo.com. I'm not big into promoting myself on Instagram. I look at using that in different ways. But with that said, come over and visit. I do put some forestry stuff on there. It's funny. I started that page with my business in mind, and then it got no traction. And the second I posted a picture of a dog on there, next thing you know, I have followers. And so a lot of the stuff on there is bird dog stuff, our adventures, our trips. So that's at Seitzinger _forestry_LLC on Instagram. So
and I'll post the links for everyone here so it's easy to find.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Any final thoughts?
Just be an advocate for forest management in your state. Use Indiana as an example and as a cautionary tale to how quickly things can change and go downhill. You want to be out in front of these issues and not look back like we have had to in Indiana with regrets. So get involved in conservation efforts, get your hands dirty, get involved in policy issues. That's the best thing you can do to be a good steward and give back to the resource that we do take from. So
those are some strong parting words in a good way. I mean, habitat's everything. Habitat management and being involved. I like it. I like it a lot. Thanks again for coming on. It's been great. I appreciate it. Thanks again to all my listeners for tuning in. And until next time, keep chasing that experience.
Thanks for tuning in to another killer episode here on Paddle and Fin. Be sure to drop a 5-star rating, a thumbs up, or smash that subscribe button on any platform you're listening in on. Be sure to check us out on Waypoint TV, waypointtv.com. Make sure you sign up for the Fantasy Kayak Fishing League at paddleandfin.com/fantasy. You could support this show through Patreon, patreon.com/paddleandfin. Don't forget to check out the website, paddleandfin.com. Catch us on YouTube. If you got a question, comment, or want to see a future guest on the show, be sure to email us at paddleandfin@gmail.com. Shout out to our show supporters, Yak Gadget. You can check out all the fine kayak accessories at yakgadget.com. Pelican Professional. For all your cases, coolers, and lighting needs, go to pelican.com. Rocktown Adventures, your Midwest premier paddle sports destination. Go to rocktownadventures.com. Eastport Marina, the beautiful destination on Dale Hollow Lake. If you're looking for lodging, kayaks, kayak accessories, or anything fishing related on the beautiful Dale Hollow Lake, go to eastport.info. And Jigmasters Jigs. When in doubt, get the jig out. Go to jigmasters.com and fill your tackle boxes today.